It's every Friday. It's no longer anything for them, anything that special. It's the mayor. Well, the mayor's there every Friday. I'm going to talk to the mayor about what's going on, what could be improved, what challenges that I have. The information I get by seeing them on Friday afternoon and staying with them on Friday night could never be replicated by looking from the outside in. It's being in the inside, it's being with them.
Welcome to the OpEdge, the Gazette's opinion podcast, where we bring you cutting-edge perspectives from Colorado's top newsmakers, columnists, and more. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, investigative columnist and your host for today's program. Since February, Aurora Mayor Mike Coffman has been spending Friday nights sleeping at Advanced Pathways, a homelessness center, learning hands-on about what things are really like for those experiencing homelessness and going through the programs provided by Advanced Pathways. To discuss this, dive into depth on his experience and lessons learned, and so much more, I'm pleased to be joined by Aurora Mayor Mike Coffman. Mayor Coffman, welcome to the OpEdge.
Oh, thank you. Good to be with you.
Always good to talk with you, sir. So before we get into some of the substantive issues and lessons learned, let me just start here. Why did you decide to spend Friday nights sleeping and living among the homeless community in Aurora?
So I got the idea that maybe I wasn't getting enough information in this Tier 1, which people just off the street are newly homeless, recently lost their housing. So I tried it. I said, well, I'm going to go Friday afternoon and meet with them, and then I'm going to stay overnight with them in the congregate shelter in what we call Tier 1. And then I help set up breakfast in the morning and help serve breakfast in the morning. So I go there about 4 in the afternoon, and I'm done by about 7:30 on Saturday morning.
Why is it so important to you to do this?
Yeah, I think the reason why is it gets me focused. I think that we still have some challenges that need to be dealt with. Are there people who could do better in moving to Tier 2, where they're engaged in things like addiction recovery, mental health, and job training as a step to becoming fully employed? What about people with severe mental health challenges? What about people with addiction challenges? Are we warehousing them? Or are we moving them forward? And so I'm really trying to resolve those issues to make sure. I think this program will be a model for Colorado and a model for the country. But it's a way for me to stay on top of everything. And be focused on it. And now that, and I go every Friday without exception. And the reason is they need to know that their mayor is going to be there on Friday afternoon and going to be asking them how they're doing and to tell me what happened during the week and what they're doing to move forward with their lives. And so I don't make exceptions to it. And I miss some pretty important events in doing so. And they also love it that I sleep over in the congregate shelter with them. And it's important to them to be able to and to where the fact that it's every Friday, it's no longer anything for them, anything that special. It's the mayor. Well, the mayor's there every Friday. I'm going to talk to the mayor about what's going on, what could be improved, what challenges that I have. And so it's turned out to be extremely valuable. The information I get by staying over, seeing them on Friday afternoon, and staying with them on Friday night, is could never be replicated by looking from the outside in. It's being in the inside. It's being with them. And I'm retired military, Army, Marine Corps, active reserve components for both. And one of the principles of military leadership is never ask somebody to do something you yourself would not do. And so I think being with them in that regard reflects that leadership.
Mayor Coffman, when you are spending those Friday afternoons and Friday nights, I'm sure you have conversations and you're learning. You're also asking questions. They may be telling you things. What are those conversations like for you on a regular weekend?
Oh, I think that there's kind of a wide variety. I think oftentimes it's me asking them questions, and sometimes for the people that have been there longer, it's probably them actually talking to me and asking me questions. But I want to know, you know, when did they get here? I want to know um, what was the process like for them to go through the system, through the intake process, through the navigation process. I want to know whether or not they met their caseworker yet. I want to know what their plan is for moving forward. Um, and one of the conclusions that I've had from all this is to say we need other, not one program can be everything to all people, and this is really a work-based program, and there are people that maybe with addictions that are bigger than we can handle, and so who can we refer them to, and then where they can come back when they're ready to work, and who for mental illness, who can we refer those people to that simply are not going to be work ready. So there's some real challenges, but I think so overall I'm real impressed, particularly the people who, maybe they were displaced because of domestic violence, maybe they were living paycheck to paycheck and made some bad decisions and wound up temporarily on the streets, but want to work, and so those people tend to move through the system really fast. It's mental health, it's addictions that are the challenges that are greater that we have to deal with to get people to
Sure.
where they are work ready. And again, it's about getting people to their highest level of self sufficiency. Not everybody is going to get 100%, but let's get them as far as we can possibly get them.
Mayor Coffman, in a moment, we'll talk about the tiers that you're discussing, tier one, two, and three. But let's look broader at the Aurora Regional Navigation Center and Advanced Pathways, this nonprofit. You're on the board of the nonprofit, as I understand it. Talk to us a bit about what the purpose of the campus is and big picture what Advanced Pathways is about in their approach.
Yeah, so I went to see often with some others, staff and some members of council, a number of different programs throughout the country. I think we went to Houston to look at their Housing First model. We went to San Antonio to look at their kind of campus, which was similar to what maybe we're doing now. Looked at Denver, looked at Colorado Springs. Probably closest right now to Colorado Springs. We were able to, quite frankly, learn from their successes and also tell us what not to do. And so they have an apartment building that's along the Housing First model. That when they took federal funds, it kind of they have to stay with that model, and they said don't ever go there, where you're just placing people without any requirements there under the theory that once stabilized they'll take advantage of the services around them and move towards self-sufficiency as much as possible. But I just don't buy that. But they had the first two tiers that we'd have. The first tier being a congregate shelter, second tier being people involved in services, and whether it's addiction recovery, mental health, or job training. And so it's it's so what we did is, in our third tier is what they told us to do, that um, they erred on, and that not going with Housing First model or what's called permanent supportive housing, but we have a former hotel and conference center, and so the rooms in the conference, the 255 rooms, are dedicated to individuals that are working full time, uh, maybe still in need of some services, but required to pay a third of their income back to the program. So, first tier, austere by design, congregate shelter, uh, men and women separate, but large room, military cots. They have to take everything out in the during the day. In the morning, they have breakfast and then they move out, uh, where they're not allowed to hang around their cots in that area, and they move to an area called the day room. And then if they go to tier two, then they have semi-private accommodations. They have a bed instead of a cot. They have secure storage for all their personal items. But they have to be doing something affirmative to move on out of homelessness and address their challenges. Again, mental health, addiction recovery, job training, and then, of course, the third tier, which I mentioned, which is the individual rooms. We're doing some reconstruction work on the individual rooms because there was some leakage in the pipes and causing some mold issues. So we're doing floor by floor by floor. The city's doing it, and those will be available pretty soon, and that will really complement the entire program. The capacity is 600 between all three tiers. Once we get that tier three going, we'll be able to ease pressure on tier two because they can move to tier three. But the objective is to get people to work.
Mike Coffman, let's talk about tier one for a moment because my understanding is you'll take everybody into that tier, unlike some programs that specifically have a work requirement to then provide a shelter. And that's, of course, the first step as you're talking about. To what extent in your conversations and your observations would you say those who are in the shelters in tier one are motivated to make change versus this is a temporary situation? They'll maybe stay there a few nights or something, and then they'll head back out, and it's not a long-term circumstance for them.
Yeah, I think that that's what I'm focused on. I think those are the real challenges. We know that tier two and tier three work. That's the big question is tier one. We clearly want people to stay. We want people to commit to doing affirmative things to move out of homelessness. But on like weather emergencies in the winter, we'll get additional individuals that will come in temporarily uh, that may not have an intention of staying, but will just take shelter from the weather, temporary shelter from the weather. And we have sort of a kind of an overcapacity area where they can stay, and then they would sleep on mats. Um, we One of the things that I'm working on is how can we do a better job with people with severe mental illness and severe addiction? How can we um, uh, do um, um, bring their cases to conclusion? Uh, Whether or not they, what can we do with them? I think on addiction, it's easier than if it's pure mental health challenge. On addiction, there are entities that will take them that we can refer to, and so I think that's the next step is taking a look at that and developing those relationships. And then once, of course, they're sober, we'd be happy to take them back and get them, help them get a job. And then I think, are we doing enough for able-bodied individuals in pushing them along, whether they want to go along or not, to stay in the facility? And then people with severe mental health. Mostly it's addiction. Sometimes it's a combination of addiction and mental health. If you use drugs for a long time, you're probably going to have some mental health issues along with your addiction. So those are the kind of challenges that help me when I stay there on Friday. The kind of things that I work on to make suggestions to bring back to the board that meets once a month and say, hey, I think we ought to be. Here's what I've observed, and here's the changes I think we ought to make.
Is there anything you could tell us about some of those lessons that you learned that maybe you've passed along to the board and said, hey, these are some adjustments to make, or any bigger picture lessons that being there consistently since February, it is now, by the time this episode will be out, it will be the very end of June.
So now I'm doing something that in addition to what I'm doing, and that in addition to staying over on Fridays, and that is I'm meeting with staff. And so I met with two. There's I think five caseworkers and a supervisor. I've met with two of the caseworkers. I want to meet with the other three. Um, but I think that one of the things I'm going to bring forward. I'm still working on how to do it, but how can we be more affirmative in working with these individuals in terms of having the caseworkers go to them versus them go to the caseworkers. I think that's one thing I'm looking at. I think another thing I'm looking at is how can we bring cases to conclusion? We're not there to warehouse people. And so if somebody has a challenge greater than what we can provide, because we can provide some service, we provide some services on site working with partners. But if we can't, let's bring it to a conclusion, and let's figure out where they should go. Um, and don't let people just exist in the system. It's not designed for that. Even though Tier 1 is austere by design, there are people that simply adjust to it. So I think those are the kind of challenges that we have, that I'm looking at, that being there, staying there over on Fridays helps me understand how to bring those solutions forward.
Mayor Mike Coffman, when we talk about the approaches that differ and what Advanced Pathways is doing here with the tiers and saying we're going to provide you shelter here. These are the initial circumstances. You get elevated to tier 2. You'll have opportunities for addiction recovery, mental health, job training. That's different, and you alluded to this, from Denver's approach that has been housing first. What is housing first? If you could recap that for us. And then how does this approach fundamentally differ from that one?
Sure, Housing First effectively says that housing is so basic to the human condition that if you resolve that, then and people become stable, then they will take advantage of the services without being mandated, without being incentivized, that they will inherently do that uh, without pushing them in that direction. The So the fundamental difference is and housing is not a congregate shelter. Housing is an individual room. And you notice Denver's purchased a number of hotels, so those individual rooms really meet the theory of housing first. And so in this program, where it's 75% funded by private entities, foundations that who want to see it be successful, but obviously are tracking what we do, the numbers. But to have a room in this program, in this incentive-based program, you have to be working full-time outside the facility, and you're required to pay a third of your income back to support the program. So I think that that's a very different approach. The two are very different approaches. Um, and so, we'll see. Um, you know, that's the, amazing about this country is that when you allow um, local governments and states to be laboratories of experiments, besides a one fits all um, strategy by the federal government. And I'm sad to say that the federal government, and this is under the second Bush administration, George W. Bush, accepted housing first as the only modality of treatment for homelessness. And so it's almost become more. I mean, it's almost a religion to where you either believe in it or you don't, and if you believe in it, you believe in all of it. And I think that it'd be interesting to see having two different approaches in two cities that are side by side, that are very different.
So, in that regard, we recently had a former Aurora City Councilman, Dustin Zvonik, now
Right.
homelessness fellow with the Common Sense Institute, on the podcast, and he broke down some of the pitfalls of housing first and the benefits of taking more of a treatment first approach and so forth. From your experience, from Advanced Pathways experience, from your observations over the years, this isn't the first time that you have spent time among the homeless. I remember a few years ago what you had done during the winter time. What have you learned about why housing first doesn't work, but this approach does?
I think the basic flaw is what is fundamental to housing first, and that is this notion that once they're stable, that they're going to take advantages of services. And I think that looking at the numbers for Denver, the last time I saw a number, that just wasn't happening. People were not advancing like that. People were just existing. And I just want to say Dustin Zvonik was a great leader on the Aurora City Council and really helped us move this housing policy forward. But yeah, so I think people ought to be incentivized. I think incentives work. They work in an economy, and they work here in terms of trying to change the behavior of people experiencing homelessness. I mean that you know, and I also think that that they they prefer being amongst each other in developing a community, because oftentimes they've lost their families through the process of their addiction, and through the problems that they have. Their relationships with their families tend to be severed, and so that there's this kind of isolation when you stick them in a room without them having anything to be engaged in. I think it's really important to have that incentive-based approach, that they've earned it, that they've earned that room, and that it's that first rung in housing, where they can go on beyond that, and to run a room, whether it's renting a room in a house or in an apartment or through a housing authority.
Just a few minutes left with you, Aurora Mayor Mike Coffman, and I want to talk for a moment about the direction Aurora may be headed in regards to the public policy approach. Obviously, you noted that Advanced Pathways is 75% funded by private organizations such as foundations and so forth, but there has been a policy or a shift in mentality, it seems to me, on the Aurora City Council that may lead the city back in a direction from a policy standpoint of housing first. Do you see signs of that? Is that a concern of yours, that perhaps that direction could be pursued that has been undertaken in Denver and not so successfully? Or do you see more cause for a path where Aurora might continue down the road that we've been seeing over the past few years?
Well, I think that clearly there are pressures to move us in the direction of Denver. I think that we will surmount those pressures, and I think that what council is learning is that we cannot afford this. The city cannot afford this program by ourselves, and the funders, the private sector funders, are not going to be there if the model is changed. They are funding this. They are involved. They are invested only because this is not a status quo program. But if they try to change the model to reflect that, then they're going to get a big bill. I mean, this is a, we're doing about, 2,500, I'm sorry, about uh, $2.5 million a year, but the total cost of the program is 10. The operating cost of the program is 10 million a year. So if you want to come up with 10 million, you want to come up with, 7.5 million dollars, which is a lot for our budget. Have at it. But there's no way that if this will resort to a status quo program, that they would be there.
Is there anything else that you think our listeners should be aware of regarding either what's happening with the homelessness issue in Aurora or bigger picture on that we haven't talked about?
Well, we did agree to be a regional. The Governor Polis and the legislature started this regional approach, and so we did agree to be that, and we did receive some funding. I think it was the total cost of buying and renovating it to meet the program design. It was about $40 million, and that came that one-time monies from the during the Biden administration, American Recovery Plan Act, that fed to the inflation as the economy was improving. They put this money out there because they wanted a government approach to improving the economy, and it wasn't good for the economy. But we utilized those monies in a manner that was respectful, to the taxpayers, and that was using it only for one-time purposes and not using it in an operating budget that would require monies year after year to sustain programs. But we did, in exchange for that, we did agree to take people from outside Aurora, as did the other regional centers. And so, but I'm excited about what we can do. And it's not doing everything that's been done. I mean, everything that's been done has failed. We have yet to have an approach. I think there are some approaches that really are effective, like Step Denver. But Step Denver, you have to remember, is not taking everybody off the street. They're only taking people that have experienced homelessness and have made a decision to change their behavior. And so we have additional challenges in taking everybody off the street and convincing them, incentivizing them to change their behavior. So, but I'm very excited about the future of the program. Until it's where I want it to be, I'm going to be sleeping there every Friday night into Saturday morning. I will be there.
I was going to ask you in that regard how long you intend on spending those Friday nights, particularly then. What is it that you're looking for? Final question for you, Mayor Coffman, that will get you to go, I think we've achieved what my goal was, or is it just going to be when you see it, you'll know it?
No, I think that I want to see people move through the system faster to employment. I want to see decisions made faster for people that are not going to be work ready, that whether it's dealing with their addiction first or it's dealing with their mental health situation and getting them as far as we can get them. When that happens as fast as I believe it should happen, maybe I hope I do come across that. Things never seem to be, everything's in Aurora. I think there's a mayor right now. Things are moving in the right direction, just not fast enough for me. But when I feel like we're where we ought to be, that tier one is not a warehouse for people. That we're expeditionally moving people through the system through tier two, tier three. When I've concluded that we're doing all we can, that's a time for me to sleep in my own bed because I hate sleeping on a cot. About 20 years ago, I was in the United States Marine Corps in Iraq, and it didn't bother me a bit. It bothers me a lot now.
Absolutely. But you got to live out the experience more authentically when you're trying to do it right?
Right.
Aurora Mayor Mike Coffman, we got to leave it there, but thanks so much for joining us here on the OpEdge.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to the OpEdge. If you enjoyed today's episode, please drop us a like, subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, and be sure to share with your friends and colleagues. For the Gazette, I'm Jimmy Sengenberger.